right, so I know it's 5 o'clock, and I'm exhausted. If anybody's been in the exhibit hall, it's really hot, and I was just in there setting up a booth. I will make this as fun and enjoyable as possible, but then again, it is development, so it depends. So I was curious. I was doing this late the other night. I was curious. Show of hands, how many people can recognize at least every single one of those items on the screen? Who can recognize at least half of them? All right, I figured. Good. I want to get a good idea of my audience that I'm dealing with. So yes, you all belong in here. So as you mentioned, my name is Todd Herman. I work for APX Labs. I've been there pretty much since the beginning. I am a developer. I do development as well as other things for them right now. Let's give you a basic idea. So I've only got 45 minutes, maybe less if I don't want to keep you guys past the time. Good thing I can see my time there. So I'm going to try to go through this as quick as possible. The basic idea is that I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to show you any code, as much as some of you may want to see code. I'm not going to show you any code. You want to see code, we will be in exhibit hall tomorrow. You can ask me about it, and I'll break out my laptop and show you all the code you want to see, within reason, of course. And if you have specific questions, I will get to the development portions. I'm basically going to review what the product is and the functionality, but as I'm doing that, I will touch on, yes, you can do this from code. You can do this from code, because for most of you in the room, according to the show of hands, it's important for you to see how the product can be incorporated into the environment. So without further ado, I've mentioned most of this already. I am the principal architect. I work for APX Labs. Skylight is our main product. APX has actually worked with wearables for a while now. We did a lot of the work with government initially, learned a lot of lessons, took the product, altered it, looked at Google. As Google came into the environment and decided to get it there, we're very glad that they sort of paved the way and showed that consumers are not ready for this. Therefore, we angled ourselves, yes, the understatement of the year, right? So it's my opinion. Consumers are not ready, and it's probably going to be a while since they are. They're going to have to be a lot smaller, and some of the other presentations we saw, a lot sexier. People are very concerned with what they wear and their appearance and that sort of thing. So we actually targeted the entity that doesn't care as much. I'm not saying they don't totally care. They don't care as much. I will use something if my company forces me to use it. But as long as it's a good product and it makes my job easier, it's better. So enterprise sort of became where we started putting our foot in the door, and we started working enterprise, moving away from the government space. So what is Skylight? I've mentioned Skylight multiple times. So Skylight let's call it a software product. It is a platform. Platform can mean many things to many different people. So it's platform in that you can develop against it in a way. There's a client that runs on devices. I'll get into devices in a little bit. There is a server backend. Therefore, that's sort of where the platform comes into play. There's lots of pieces in the back end that allow all of this to work. And then there's the piece that integrators can use along with the server to sort of integrate everything into their environment. We are not a COTS product. We're not an off-the-shelf. We are in a way. People yell at me for just now saying that. We are in a way, but it's limited, right? If I give you the product right now and you used it, you could make calls with somebody on the back end. You could see contact lists. You can do that sort of thing, but that's it. It's kind of limited. What does that mean to your environment? It doesn't mean much. Where it means much is if you can integrate, and that's sort of the development piece. If you can integrate that into your environment, meaning you can write something using an SDK that then takes all the data from your back end, pipes it through our server into the client, then it is value add for your company. Now people can do their job and do work. And that is the target of Skylight, is those individuals that they need their hands. They need their hands to do their job. There's a lot, and I can never sit there. Every time I say there's a lot, I can never think of all of them. But a field technician is really the biggest one. Field technician, assembly line workers, somebody who needs information, but also needs to use their hands at the exact same time. So it can be somewhat cumbersome to try to have a mobile phone, like, okay, what was that? All right, I need to do that, and then try to do it. Or let me see if I can get a video about that or instructions about that or something to that effect. If they can get that information on a watch, which is at least more readily available and easier to glance at than actually holding up the phone, or across the glasses. We'll go into more details after watch time. So architecture, I'll briefly talk about architecture. I'll go over the same things multiple times. There's the server piece I mentioned. There's a dashboard. So we do have an out-of-the-box dashboard that you get. So that's your, typically we kind of separate the user space, or I do when I'm talking about it. So you've got the people who are using the devices. They're not really going to use the dashboard that much. There's not a lot of value add for them to be on the dashboard, except when they initially need to log on. They get a QR code from the dashboard and then log on. The bigger value add for the dashboard is somebody needs to administrate all these systems, all the users, the information going back and forth, and that's where the dashboard comes in. The administrator is the main user of the dashboard, as well as a supervisor. Supervisor or subject matter experts might be sitting in a room or maybe a call center to some degree, and they're using the dashboard so they can help and assist the field engineers who are out doing the work. The field engineer can then call back to the dashboard user instructing help, or the dashboard user could call them saying, hey, what's going on? And I'll get into the idea of calling shortly. You'll see, I wish I could gesture, the screen's behind me, but it doesn't matter. The little circle that says the add-in with the puzzle piece. That is, I will go into that. That is where the development piece is. So it's partially in the world of the Skylight server and partially outside of the world, in the world where your customer sides are. So it's a plugin architecture. Again, I'll go into details in about 15 minutes. I'll go into details on it. 20, I lied. I'll go into details, and that is the piece where if you have databases, if you have, I've integrated with portions of SAP, if you have Oracle database, if you have web services, any back-end systems that are a part or integral part of your system, and you need data from that. You need tasking from a back-end SAP system or something like that. That information can be pulled into an add-in. The add-in can then create Skylight portions off of it, and then therefore talk back to the client, and then that information was seen. And I'll basically show examples. Plus, again, we have a booth. I'll show you demos, or somebody will show you demos all day tomorrow. Maybe not me. We will see. So next slides. I'm not going to go into the dashboard. The dashboard is I pretty much said, right? You can do calling on the dashboard. You can set up users and you set up accounts. You can, in some extent, create some of the data. We will be expanding that. Right now, it's not a big content creator. It will change. One of the value adds for using the dashboard is if you have established a call. All right, so I guess I'm going to talk about calling. When I say calling, you actually can do a peer-to-peer call between client device and a dashboard, dashboard, client device to client device. You will actually see the call occurring depending on the device. It depends on where it is. So if it's using what I call an overlay device, go into other slides. If it goes into, if it's going to happen, if you're using an AR device, overlay device like Apps and Bavarios, then the call will basically be in your right bottom corner. If it's a HUD device, then it's going to be just basically the whole screen will be the actual call. It can be one-way call, it can be two-way call. We use WebRTC, so it's pretty much a standard internet calling system. So consider it VoIP for Skylight. We do have Active Directory integration support, and the other value add on the dashboard side is if they are having a call, the user on the dashboard can actually draw on the picture. They can telestrate on the image, so they can draw a circle. And if it's if you're using a HUD device, that becomes a picture is taken of that image and sent down to the HUD. So then you get a still image of where they telestrated. So they wanted to say like, remove this piece or something like that. They can just do that easily. If it's an overlay device, then that overlay will actually be drawn in the space in front of them. All right, moving on. So talked about the dashboard, talked about the server, the clients. So I just mentioned a couple of the clients. We are, I don't want to say device agnostic. We're attempting to be device agnostic. The software doesn't immediately run on everything. It depends on what flavor. I mean, all these devices, if you used them, they use different versions of Android. Some don't even use Android, such as Apple Watch. But we're just now moving into the watches space as well, as sort of a separate device, a different way to get the information. Not all the time. It depends on the use cases. We know they need information, but maybe they don't always need to have the glasses on. But the watch works too. A mobile device can work too. That way we have shared information across the different devices. But right now we support Epson Vivario. That is the one AR device, the bigger one in the market right now for this kind of thing that we currently support. If you don't know what those are, stop by the booth. I believe Epson is actually here as well. Actually, I'm not positive, but they should be. View6M100, we support those. We have those at the booth. Recon Jet, Google Glass, those are all HUD devices. Sony Smart Glasses, a little bit different device, kind of in the middle there. I think it's a holographic display. And right now we support Android Wear, but we will be moving to Apple Watch as well. The sort of the decision we made, and here's a little programming insight, I guess you could say. The decision we made early on, and we're hoping it was the right one, I think it's the right one, is that we're actually not developing in Java, even though this is Android. We're actually using C# development. So our front end and back end are both C#. Where that comes in handy is that we are using Xamarin, so basically Mono, for those don't know that they changed their name, to actually run C# in Android. It compiles to Android. It runs perfectly fine, the same speed, works great, but now we're cross-platform. So we can actually run this code on Apple as well. And we won't have to change a lot of stuff to then support Apple, who knows if they're coming up with glasses or not, right? Did they just buy somebody? Well, we'll see. I think they have some patents. We'll see. How I'm doing time. All right, so interaction, I'll do this part quick. Depending on the device. Like I said, we work with different devices, so it depends on what the device is. Most of the HUDs are either, well, they're all touch. It's either swipe touch, a touchpad, or most of them are tap. I think the M100 has a toggle switch and a select. And Google Glass, most of you have probably seen it swipe. You don't have that. Well, you kind of do with Epson Vivarios. There's actually a tethered device, which is actually a touchpad itself. But for the most part, you put that away. And it's just using head tracking then at that point. So there's the AR aspect. You move your head, not your eyes. You move your head. It's a little weird to get used to, but you move your head around and it moves. Basically, there's a reticle locked in the middle of the screen. As you move your head, it moves. So that's how you use that to select items. And voice support as well. It's actually new to version 5. So both devices. Okay, Skylight, I'm just going to do it plain, and I'll try to divide between HUD and overlay, but I'm not going to go into that too much. They both have a launcher menu, so basically there's a core menu that comes up. For HUD, it's not always there. Any of the screenshots you see that have the orange border, those are actually screenshots from our overlay support, so basically the Epson Vivarios right now. The black is actually going to be transparent. For those not overly familiar with the AR aspect, the black will be transparent. So that menu won't always be there in your view. It's actually a small circle above your field of vision. So you do the head tracking, look up, and then you see the circle, and then you select it, and the menu pops up. For the HUD devices, you get the green bordered image up there at the top. And you have camera access. You have access to any existing tasks or work streams, which I'll go into detail because it's a new aspect. You have access to those. You have access to any of your contacts. So there's the concept of groups and everything on the back-end system. So if you are in the group with somebody else and that person is also online at the same time, then wherever that person is, you will actually see that that person's online. You can actually establish a call with that person as well. So that's core. Notifications, pretty basic. I'm not going to go into every mobile device has some sort of notification. You need to be known when something occurs. So in this case, there's no difference. They're down in the bottom. You kind of glance down and you'll see it in the bottom of your vision for the overlay. For the HUD, they pop up and take up the whole screen momentarily. You can, for the HUD, you can dismiss them or tap to select them. Info panels. Info panels are information, well, obviously, because they're called info panels. They're informational objects, I guess you can say. So for the overlay, they're extremely useful. The image in the back there, the three icons on the left with some text in the graph, those are info panels. And that's actually a screenshot from a demo I had created, and we don't have here, but I probably could figure it out. They're stuck over to the left of your screen, so you will see them, and they're somewhat transparent, so as you're working, you will see this information. And the add-in controls, I didn't mention add-in. The add-in is what you program to actually integrate this into your environment. We'll get into details of that to some extent. But the concept of the add-in here is that the add-in will allow you to create those info panels, decide what's in those info panels. The info panels can contain text, they contain an icon, they can contain, you can control the font size of it, whether it's bold or not to some extent. You can show a graph, in that way it's actually an image that I'm just changing. The values, I've used it before for some demos and prototypes where there's sensor information coming from SAP. Has anybody heard SAP's talk earlier in the theater? They talked about all the sensor data. Well, that sensor data can then be pulled from an add-in, pulled down and displayed to the user live. So as they're getting ready to work on a machine, maybe they can see the past 4 hours, a graph like show up in the info panel like live. This is the last 4 hours. This is the high and low of the pressure in this pump that I'm about to work on. So they can basically get a better idea of exactly what's happening. So on the HUD device, they are not in your field of vision constantly. It depends on what screen you're on. You have to specifically go to the home screen, and then you'll see the info panels there. So that's where they differ between the HUD and the overlay. And I know I'm talking fast. I apologize. Watching the clock. Media, fairly obvious, but there's a couple caveats. So obviously from an add-in, you can send video, you can send an audio file, and you can send images. Typically, it's information that is going to be useful to the person. Here's a diagram of some circuit board that you're getting ready to work on in case you need to look at it. Here's a video on how that circuit board can be removed or what screws you need to change or something like that. So it's information that is useful to the technician that can be populated. Again, 100% up to you. If I just handed you Skylight now, you wouldn't have those images. It's up to the partners, the developers, for the company that you're doing this for the enterprise, whoever this is for, it's up to them. They're the ones that know their information. They're the ones that know their use case. Therefore, Skylight doesn't presume to know it. It just makes sure that it has what it needs to allow others to get that data there. So the other two caveats are there's a radar, which is the circle in the very bottom with the green border. The circle with the dots, it almost looks like a video game. That's showing you locations of objects. Objects called points, which I'll mention in a second. Well, I guess I'm mentioning it now. Oops. And the last one was map. So we do have the concept of being able to show a map in a media panel as well. Messages and questions, very basic. You can send a message from the dashboard to a user and it pops up in the bottom or pops up as a notification. That's fairly standard. For the, the HUD overlay, it's exactly the same thing. There's a message. We do have the concept of questions. So a question is just a message where you expect a response back. So in that case, an add-in can actually, you can program using our framework, an add-in. You can write sort of a workflow. Like you can ask, do you need a tasking system? Do you need a task right now? Are you currently in a process of needing a task? If they respond with no, then basically have a timer on that back end that says, that waits a certain amount of time and then maybe ask them again, or waits till they get to a certain location and then ask them again. You can go off of really whatever you want to go off of. If they say yes, then maybe you pull a back-end system, find a task that's available, send it to them, and then maybe ask another question, or just give it to them and let them finish the task. All of that can be managed. You get the information back into the add-in. It goes through the full cycle. I should have time to get into that as well. Points I mentioned. Points are available in both HUD and overlay. They are more useful in overlay because they are actually AR objects to some extent. They represent, and they're 100% created by the add-in side. They're based on a use case. If you have a location that you need to highlight, you sort of create this point. So it has to be geospatially located. You create this point, and then as the people put on their overlay device, if they're within a given range, say 10 kilometers of that point, they will actually see it. They have the radar on, that arrow will actually point to it. So as they turn their head around, they'll see this point. And as they focus on it, as that image in the background shows, I don't know if you can actually see me highlighting it. The back one with the, looks like a clover leaf because we actually call it. It's the orange one behind the one in the front. It has the green arrow. That is actually a point that's been opened. So if you focus on the point, it's actually just a small little circle. If you focus on it, it opens up into this. The add-in, the developer of the add-in makes the decision on what those leaves are, what information is there. It can be the name of some object. In a demo I've done before, I used it to highlight like turbines that were in a field, or to represent turbines in a field. So therefore, if you focused on one of the points, you'd get the name of the turbine. You'd get one of the leaves on the side would actually, if you selected that leaf, then you could get information about that turbine, some status information. If you focused on the other leaf, maybe it played a video about the current status of that turbine. And maybe if you looked at the bottom, it was like how far away you are from it. It's up to you to decide what information you need there if you need to use that aspect. All right, next camera. Camera. Everybody's used camera. So record a video, take a picture. Skylight supports time-lapse. So every few seconds, it'll just sit there and take pictures. And the pictures actually all go to the back end. So the server has a data catalog. Every image goes back to the back end. Every video goes to the back end. And from the dashboard, other people can view and get access to those images as well, or videos. So everything's saved to the server. Not going to go into details. Code scanning. You can actually scan QR codes, UPC codes, code 39, most standard barcodes. That's fairly standard. You can control whether code scanning gets turned on or not from the add-in. That's the thing. So this is part of a workflow. If you have a workflow for a person, you can start the workflow when they scan a code. So if there's a certain room that they need to get to, when they get to the room, maybe there's a code there. They scan that code. Now the code that you have written know that they're at that location. Now you can send them a task that says, okay, now that you're at that room, do this. Or now that you're at the room, you need to go in this direction and then do this. So all of these things are to allow you to build and construct a workflow that makes sense to your environment and to your workers. Or video calling, I think I mentioned everything on there. So voice over Sun and Turn, for those not familiar, the calling does support that. We do have support for it. For those that are not familiar with it, basically it's NAT traversal. If you have two entities, since it's peer-to-peer, if you have two entities behind firewalls, that it lets you, the two of them still talk. There's different ways it works. I can go into it later. Stun and Turn, the documents for them, IETF, are giant and huge, and I don't want to go through them right now. But basically, I talked to you about call. It is very cool to actually see. So please, if anybody wants to see it, you can stop by the booth tomorrow, and it will be demoed for you. Offline support. We all know Wi-Fi can be very spotty. So when you have your working information, you're no longer going to be able to communicate with that add-in. So we do have something built in that if you do certain actions, if you take videos, if you take pictures, if you do that kind of stuff when you're offline, you can actually, once you get to a spot where you can go back online, that information is then uploaded to the server, and then your admin can kind of respond accordingly, like, oh, okay, you finished all this, that's good. Here's some new tasks for you. You can choose to go offline if you know you're about to be in a very spotty situation. You can choose, like, all right, I'm about to go offline. Let me go ahead and wait. What I mean by wait is that the admin can choose, like, okay, I'm going to send you all this media right now because you're about to go offline. That's fine. I understand. Here's like 5 images you're going to need. Here's a video you're going to need. You can wait for all that to cache. So there is a built-in caching system that will automatically cache everything locally. That way you can then choose, okay, let me turn Wi-Fi off, and then you can go out, do what you need to do, then come back to where it is. Otherwise, I mean, we know how it drains batteries when your Wi-Fi is going up and down constantly. All right, what am I doing? Workspace Toolbar. This is basically for the overlay only, and it's just a shortcut object. Basically, like I said, where if you glance up, you can get the launcher menu to appear. If you glance down, this Workspace Toolbar will actually just appear, and it's context sensitive. So it's just a helper piece, only if you're using the overlay client. if you're currently working with a photo or camera or something like that, then you'll see icons just to pick. Rather than having to go through the menu itself and look for it, it saves a few extra steps. So that's nothing controlled by the add-in in that aspect, but that's just a feature just to help. Work streams. Do I have enough time to go into work streams? Work streams are a new aspect of R5. I don't know how, I see a few familiar faces. So some people might be familiar with our task system, which was in the previous system. So previously we just had tasks. Tasks were very basic. Tasks were, you had the concept of a task list, and you had multiple tasks that could be under it, and that was it. There was no hierarchy. You could have responses to tasks, but you could only have up to 4. It was extremely limiting, and the more and more we worked with customers, it was very hard to get it to push or be forced into what they needed, right? They needed to be able to, well, I need this diagram to come up, and I need them to be able to choose all these different things. Always we came up with that they needed at least multiple levels of hierarchy. I need, this isn't, yes, I have these 4 tasks, but this task has 8 steps, this task has 2 steps, and this one has, 10 steps. So we have the concept of work streams. So what you're seeing there is an image, I don't know how it's large enough to see. Our demos at the show are specifically for showing off work streams. So I can definitely go into more details about work streams. But it is it is going to be for the HUD devices only for right now. And it is, the information is sent. So what you're seeing up there is you get this line, and on the line are items or nodes, if you will. And they're all created by your add-in. Your add-in creates these work streams based on the workflow you need. So this is giving the user an actual workflow. There isn't logic built into it, very minor logic, but there isn't a lot of logic built into it. Your add-in can still reflect and do certain things. Your work streams can be finite in that they have like 5 items on the root level work stream, and then it ends with a mark complete. If they're finished all their tasks throughout it, they can hit the mark complete. Then the add-in's informed that it was completed and you can move on. You have the concept of the different items that can be on the node. There can be a shortcut, which then will branch down to another work stream. If you hit the shortcut, you can have another work stream linked in. So they could drop down multiple levels to do multiple tasking. You can have items on the list that perform specific actions. There can be an item on the list to take a picture. So the way I've built out some of the work streams just for demos is that you have like a work stream that lists like, okay, you need to identify what is happening with this pump. There's 2 things I need you to test. For the root level, there's like 2 items that are shortcuts, and then there's an item for I've done both those checklists. So basically the first item is a checklist, so you go into it, and there's a node that allows me to put in multiple images and text as a detail node, so I can add here's information you may need to use for doing this task. Then I had multiple items that were simply steps. Step 1, I need you to check this. Step 2, check this. Step 3, check this. And at the end of that line, I put 3 actions in case they needed it. One was record a video, one was take a picture, and one was call a subject matter expert for assistance or help. You can build that out however you need it. It's completely arbitrary and up to you. You can actually, instead of putting a check on the root level, you can decide to make it finite or infinite. It doesn't end. They'll perform a certain task, and when they perform that task, perhaps your add-in then adds another item. Okay, now I need you to do these. All right, now you need to do this. So you can build it out as you need to. We call that concept branching. Yeah, there's so many things. I could spend the rest of the time completely on workstreams. If you want more details on workstreams, because it is brand new, please absolutely ask me questions. My email, I think, was in the first slide. But I can give it to whoever needs it. I'll be at the booth. Workstreams are, like I said, they're a very new feature, and they're very, very, very robust. They can get very complex, but they can be extremely useful to spell out, to fill in the workflow that the individual needs. So we move on. We've also added support for voice. So if you're on a work stream, you can actually navigate just using voice now with the HUD devices. You can also use it for specific key commands as well. fairly standard voice support. But it helps for that aspect of the worker wanting to work hands-on. If they're having to, maybe they have gloves on, and we've run into that. Maybe they have gloves on and they can't really swipe or touch. They need another mechanism to do it. If they're not using the overlay device, then they can't use head tracking. Therefore, they're going to have to use something else. We have integrated with some other things in a rudimentary way. We're looking at building that out a little bit more. We've tested and played with Mayo, and if anybody's seen that, that's the armband. I think they might be here. But it's the armband, so we've used that to allow people to gesture as well in that regard. But we've added voice. Under the hood, we have a concept of state, which I will go into. Checking time, good. And the two other important things that aren't like specific features you see or use. One is we do have under the hood of the HUD clients, we do have support for Bluetooth LE. Therefore, basically from the add-in, you can say, hey, I need you to listen, I need you to tell me if you get near a Bluetooth beacon that has this MAC address or this MAC address. You can give the client a list of MAC addresses and say, listen to these, tell me when you're near them and how far away you are. Give me any information about them you can. And then when the client does get near them or does get information, it sends it back to that. And that way your add-in, your code can decide, okay, they're really close to that one. Let me then send them to another one. So you can use it. We had a customer do it. You can use it for indoor location at that point by having them direct down the hallway and basically just build out the system that says just a line of beacons wherever they need to go. We also, communications between the client, the backend, the add-in, and everything's built on a secure communications layer. And then the concept of state. State becomes important from your add-in perspective because the add-in is more reactive. Yes, from the coding that you do on the add-in, you can say, hey, I need you to do this. But when do you do that? When would you send them a picture? You don't know when they're online if I didn't have this concept. So there's an event system built into the add-in that when they come online, you do know. There's an event that fires, and you write the code that says, oh, okay, this person's now online. Let me do this, or let me send this. There's also a whole state and eventing system built around this. And I might have a slide that goes into more detail. But information about the current state of the client as you use and perform actions on the client is being collected and gathered up. So when you perform an action, that information is immediately sent to the server. So if you take a picture, immediately sent to the server, you just took a picture, here's the current state of the CPU, here's some memory, here's some Wi-Fi. Information that may be pertinent at that time. Also, here's the information about the picture I just took. Here's the information about the point I just opened. Here's information about the video I just took. The node on the work stream that I just passed or read. The item on the work stream that I actually just selected. All of that gets sent every time it happens up to the server, and the add-in can listen for any of those events. That way, that's how you are able to bridge. That way you can know, oh, okay, they just finished that. You know, this user just did this. Then if there's anything associated with it, if they took a picture, then you know what picture they took. You have the ID for it, and they can immediately grab it out of the catalog or do something else with it that you might need to. So the concept of the state and the eventing is extremely important for the developer side. So actually doing the extensibility. What am I doing? All right, so a little similar to the diagram I had earlier, but I just broke it out slightly more. I broke out the add-in piece and added this thing called the Adhan Host. So for anybody who's going to develop for Skylight, we have this host component. We have multiple components that run on the server. We have one that manages the media that comes in. We have one that manages the points. We have the portions that handle and manage the work streams and deal with the work streams. We also have one called the Adhan Host component. This is code that we've written, so if anybody's going to develop for it, we give this piece to you. This is an executable. It runs as a service, and it attaches itself. It's configured to, you can configure it, it's just a configuration file. It's configured to attach to the Skylight server. And it acts as the bridge. It's the host. It's literally the host to the add-in. So when you write an add-in, it's a plugin architecture. So you're writing a plugin using an SDK. I wrote the host with help of other people at the company. And it's using the same basic contract that I used to write create the SDK. So you use the SDK to create the add-in. The host will understand the add-in. It'll load the add-in up. When the host runs, it looks for this add-in. It says, okay, the add-in should be in a specific folder. We take care of most of that for you. We have documentation that handles all that. Okay. 5 minutes. Okay. Yes. I'll make it work. Okay, 5 minutes, so I guess I have to talk really fast now. The Addon SDK. See, now I'm getting into the actual code part that I like the most. Like I mentioned, it is written in C#. It doesn't mean, I think I mentioned this in another slide, it does not mean that you have to use C# to write your code. Right now, it is the best way to use the Addon SDK, is to use C#. We do have a method that you can use Python, Java, or other languages, as long as that other language can then attach to, basically it can obfuscate the language by we have an add-in that will use WebSockets and just exchange JSON. So as long as you can speak that, you can use a different language right now. Let's see, open it, I said what's that? It's 5 minutes. See, you scared me with that 5 minutes. It's fine. I really don't care. It's fine. People keep dwindling out of here anyway. So I know everybody's getting tired. I know, I got it. I am too. The host, I mentioned most of that. For every add-in you create, you're going to use one host. You just keep using that host and alter it as you need to, but for the most part, you won't need to. Point to the same server. So you can have multiple of your add-ins running at the same time. The only caveat you have to think about and consider is that if they're doing the same thing, obviously they're going to compete. They can't listen to the same events and then send the same things to the client, or the client's going to get two of everything. It's really when, like, okay, I'm going to manage photos, so you write the add-in that's going to manage like any image that's taken by any client at all. I'm going to get that information and store it in a different backend system that I already have. Or I'm going to manage tasks or work streams. All right, a couple slides left. Oh, already said that one, so I can skip that one. All right, client state. I basically covered that. And I basically covered that. See, look, I'm going to actually meet it. So this is an example of what I mentioned. So the screenshot you're seeing is of the overlay device. So it's the HUD device. And basically there's a point. You see the point up in the corner. The concept is the client is, in this little simulation, the client is going to move his head to move that cursor in the middle and select the point. That's going to cause that client state, that event to fire up to the server. Yes. So the first thing that your add-in needs to decide, okay, I need to know when that point's opened, because I need to do something. I need to react to it in some way, send them more information or get information or do something. So from the code, from the SDK, there's actually a method that you use to subscribe. You say, okay, I'm interested in knowing about these point events. Please tell me these point events. So that's what this is showing here. You've subscribed to the point event. The server goes, got it, because it's got a built-in component that manages the state stuff. Then the user looks over to the point, and the point opens. The moment that point opens, that event from the client flies up to the server and says, hey, this point just opened. The point ID is this. I have these leaves. I have this information. So everything about that point is sent up to the server. Because the add-in said, I need to know when this occurs, that information is then sent right to the add-in saying, hey, this person just opened this point. When you subscribe to the events this way, it's not user-specific. Anybody in the entire system that opens a point, your add-in is going to get every single one of those. But that becomes extremely important because it's how you manage the whole workflow. I mean, your users have workflows. It's how you manage the system and workflows beyond just building out the work streams. So you can build out the work streams, but you need to know when to build out the work streams, when to react. But this same system works for the work streams as well. So when they've selected to take a picture, when they've selected a node that is subnode, the add-in may need to do something about it. It may need to reach back and grab something else in a tasking system and then populate more information for them at the time, rather than giving them everything stored on the client. You may need to repopulate additional information. We can't know all the scenarios. She's about to hold up another card at me, isn't she? Thank you. Good. So the SDK itself, this is my one slide that covers the entire SDK. Actually, I talked about most of it. You create info, you do anything, you create, remove, update, delete info panels. Fully control info panels from the add-in. Work streams, fully controlled from the add-in. Every aspect of it, you fully control from the add-in SDK. Methods for all of it. Creating points, fully from the SDK. There's methods to create. The events that go along with it are all part of the SDK as well. And the SDK is what you use to build a plugin. You're building a plugin for this. Manage media, like I said, you can call back to the server and find out what's stored in the data catalog at the time. You can send a media if it happens to be on a URL or some backend system. You can send that down to the client. You can fully control all of that. Send messages and questions. You can force actions to occur. You can say, right now, I need you to take a picture. They will be warned. It won't do it immediately. It will show the countdown like it normally occurs and then take the picture. You can do the timeline. You can record a video. And you can, I already said scan a code. And you can also request state of a client. So all that state that's going up, it's actually being aggregated on the server. So you can say, hey, server, tell me the current state of that client. It can say, oh, okay, I've got 2 points nearby. I've got these info panels open, and I'm currently in a call. So you can get information, because the more information you have, the more you've got. She's reaching for another card. So in conclusion, please, if anybody's more interested, I know that was like a rapid covering of a lot of information. I can't even speak anymore. I'm very parched. Please visit our booth. Reach out to me. Any questions? I've got no problem. I don't know if I have time for questions anymore. 5 minutes for questions. Thank you. Thank you for starting the clapping. All right. Any questions? Yes.
Hi there. I'll try to talk a little slower.
Okay. Go ahead.
How do you create the point? I'm assuming there's no object recognition or image recognition. So is the point
There's
geo-based?
not. It's geospatially located.
Okay.
That's right now
So
the only way we do points. So it's geospatial, and since these devices all have GPS, they know where it's located. So we just put it into 3D space at a certain distance away from the person, but it's still at that GPS location. Yes. Well, she's coming with the mic. Him first, then him back there in the blue shirt.
So when you have the points, you were talking about that you could work in an offline state.
Yes.
But you also showed at the end that you had to go to the server to get an open state. So
you can go ahead and finish your question.
Yeah. So that's one question.
Yes.
And then the second question is, how much history do you keep on your states as well?
I think right now, to be 100% honest, we keep all the state history. Like right now, we probably have scripts that are available that will clean things out right now, but it's not, we're not limited at the moment. The idea being that we're actually going to be expanding that concept because we want to build onto the dashboard more of an admin portion that allows that information to be aggregated and you can see. I mean, that information can become extremely useful. Yes, exactly. So it can be. And the first part of your question, oh, shoot, now I forgot it. Points. You can't. So if you're offline, anything that did rely on the add-in can't anymore. Points will actually be crushed if you're on an offline state. You wouldn't be able to do anything with them. However, we did build into workstreams the concept of, I talked about the branching, so you could branch and get more workstream pieces as you needed them. You can sort of do that with workstreams in an offline mode, and that when you create the workstream, you can denote certain items on the list as being hidden and certain items being required. So you can force them to use the workstream in a linear fashion by using the required. And if you have hidden ones, you can, not in a very robust way, but you can say this will become unhidden when this occurs. Now, like I said, it's not very robust. and it stays on the client. It's not calling back. But for example, if you scan, if you use, if the scan for node 1 has this content, then unhide node 2, right? So you can then, oh, they scanned object this and it had ID this. Well, then I'm going to unhide that because that means they have to do this checklist. So you can work with some things that way, but points not right now. I think, yeah, he still has a question.
Any plans for any kind of Unity plugin on the add-in side?
No plans at this moment. No plans. I hesitate like that because we went back and forth early on, like what we were going to do a lot of the stuff on the client, build the client in. Unity was one of the things that was an object. I'm not sure yet. Unity came up more. I've spent a lot of time with HoloLens recently, and Unity's coming more and more into our forefront because of what we're seeing with that, but not at the moment. Any other questions? Then you are all free.